In a world where people care more about resolution over content, one man, one camera, the Panasonic GH4. Wait a minute, another GH4 review? Really? Hey everyone, Steven here from Film Bros Media. Sorry about the weird throaty dude, he tends to get a little carried away. Anyway, welcome to my review of the GH4. I shot a lot of footage on this camera, so I decided to edit them together in various situations such as narratives, corporate work, stills, or even just during my free time. First, onto ergonomics! The GH4 is really comfortable to hold. I love the buttons, it never felt like it was going to slip out of my hand while shooting. Top mode dials are really nice, I like the locking mechanism. The only thing I don't like is the record buttons. I just wish the record button was placed at a more convenient spot. The flip out screen is really nice. It's an OLED touchscreen and there's a lot of menu functions that goes along with it. I love the highlight shadow function. I would use that sparingly. Lifting up the shadows might bring too much noise. You have options between shooting in cinema 4K, Ultra HD, or standard 1080p with 96 frames per second. One of the most useful functions on this camera is the peaking, really great for critical focus. I love how there's waveforms that you can just move around with the touch of your finger. Zebras are really nice. You can't see it here, but you know, it's nice to have. As for recording, I like to use the SanDisk 64 gigabyte, 95 megabits per second card. The battery is awesome. I could shoot one whole day with it and not really worry about it running out. The thumb wheel is a little fiddly, but it works. It's there and I still use it. My favorite combo is the 18-35 by Sigma with the Metabone Speed Booster. Really awesome combo. And there are a lot of other options too. There's a lot of vintage lenses that you can adapt to this. One of my most used lenses is the 12-35 2.8. It's a good run and gun shooter and good for all around documentary shooting. So let's talk about narratives. A lot of people have been disputing whether the GH4 is even acceptable for shooting cinematic images. And I say yeah. It's got enough dynamic range, not a lot of it, but just about enough. Good color, good skin tones. And I think the 4K image quality has enough detail and resolution to give a really pleasing aesthetic. Here's me looking like a doofus. I think a lot of people have been very hesitant because it's just too sharp, but with the right grading and the right lookup table, I think you'd be surprised how well the 8-bit codec from the GH4 handles heavy color grading. I love how versatile this camera is because of its portability. You could place it on the slider, or you could quickly take it off the slider and mount it on a tripod or even on a shoulder rig and get shots like this. Most of these shots you see here is all practical light. So if the GH4 can do well in natural or practical lighting, then I'm sure it'll do well in studio lighting. A lot of people will complain, "It doesn't have a lot of dynamic range. Oh, it's too sharp, it looks like video." Well, guess what? It is video. If you don't like video, then shoot on film. Rolling shutter on the GH4 in 4K is not very good, but here you don't notice it as much. Moving the camera back and forth. Here I'll demonstrate how much more pronounced it is. No! As you can see based on the red line I just placed here, it really is pronounced, especially in 4K, but when you switch back in 1080p, then it's not so bad. So let's talk about how the GH4 handles color grading. I've been shooting mostly on the profile called the Cinema Like D, and it's the flattest profile you can get. And as you can see here, it handles the lookup table and heavy color grading just fine, and it looks pretty natural, and I like the skin tones. Overall, do I think the GH4 is acceptable for cinematic quality?
Yeah.
Or can the GH4 handle a production with a bigger budget?
I guess so.
You be the judge. Now, corporate work is a way different beast from narrative work. In my experience, the most essential thing when working with a client is getting the video done as fast as you can. I mean, quality and content is important, but to be able to get your rushes in a timely manner is essential to keeping a good relationship with your clients. And I think the GH4 really does well in that aspect. It may seem like a very small-ish camera, but I'd say that if you sell your clients on shooting in 4K and mastering in 1080, you'll not only have a lot of luck impressing your clients, but you'll be able to utilize these tools very efficiently, not only while you're shooting, but especially in post-production. Here's Keiko Olingas. I met her at a local convention in the Bay Area, and she's one of the main reasons why I purchased a GH4 in the first place, so check her out on her Twitter. And what I love about the GH4 is that you can easily drop the 4K footage into your editor, whether it be Final Cut Pro or Premiere, and it works seamlessly without any lag. My absolute favorite situations to use the GH4 in is in environments such as these. I took the GH4 out to Yosemite not too long ago, and I loved the footage coming out of it. I mean, the 4K detail, it's just amazing when you capture nature at its finest. When you're shooting detailed shots such as trees or water or skies, there is no aliasing, there's no moire. It's just an all-around great camera for these conditions. And like I mentioned earlier, the lightweight ergonomics of the GH4 definitely helps when you're traveling with it. And did I mention, the slow motion is freaking awesome. So the slow motion is not as detailed as 4K since it's in 1080p, but it really does still have a great aesthetic to it. Anything at slow motion looks good. So while I was shooting in Yosemite, nature decided to get really interesting by snowing, raining. It was a great weekend of shooting. It's a photographer or videographer's dream, and the GH4 was perfect for this because of the weather sealing. I mean, the GH4 was absolutely soaked. I was absolutely soaked. It felt like I went out for a swim with all of my clothes on, but I was really surprised that the GH4 was able to handle all this abuse. The GH4's small size and lightweight ergonomics really helped in this situation. And I've taken this GH4 everywhere with me, like literally everywhere. I mean, it's not something you can fit in your pocket, but it's certainly not going to be too heavy on your back or your backpack for that matter. I've taken this to festivals, to celebrations, to pretty much any situation you can think of in terms of a leisurely environment. And you could film your cute little doggy. Oh, so cute. I'm just gonna briefly touch on photography with this camera, and I think it's great even at 16 megapixels. Here are some of my favorite shots from Yosemite, and they're perfect enough for prints in my opinion. You could shoot it in all different kinds of situations, professional and leisurely, of course. I love being able to have that versatility of taking it with me everywhere. And I love being able to extract a still image from something you shot in 4K. It's gonna lose some megapixels, but it's great for being able to post on the internet or even for prints. So let's see how the GH4 matches up against these other cameras within its price range. So here's the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera at ASA 400, and this is how it handles color grading. Does pretty well. And I decided to also test it in 800 ASA, and this is all in ProRes right now. Now this is with raw 800 ASA at its native ISO. Handles color grading obviously a lot better than the ProRes. Here's the Blackmagic Cinema camera at 400 ASA, ProRes, Seems to handle color grading quite well. And I think the Blackmagic Cinema camera does a little bit better than the Pocket Cinema camera in terms of color. Here's the raw 2.5K for the Blackmagic Cinema camera. It definitely handles color grading very well compared to all the previous shots we've seen so far. Here's the Canon 5D Mark III hacked with Magic Lantern. The image quality is great for the most part, but I think it's much softer than the other cameras. The Panasonic GH4 definitely has the best detail and resolution, of course, with 4K, and I think it handles color grading with lookup tables pretty well. As for 1080p, it's not as detailed as 4K, of course, but I think it's still much better than what you would see out of the 5D Mark III. And here it is at slow motion, 96 frames per second. And there's my buddy TJ. He's so silly. Alright, so here's a low light test between the GH4 and the 5D Mark III. And there's really no competition. I mean, the 5D Mark III is really good in low light. I mean, the full frame sensor certainly helps it in terms of grabbing more light and being more sensitive in lesser lit conditions, and it doesn't get noisy until around 25,600 ISO, which is pretty impressive. So here's the GH4 at 1080p, and I think it's perfectly usable in low light. It's not as good as the other full frame cameras out there, but it certainly holds its own when it comes to low light. When you're shooting in 4K, however, I think it's a little bit noisier than the 1080p, but like I said, certainly usable up to 3200 ISO. A lot of people will think differently about that, but I found that if you use some noise removal in post, it's certainly usable, and I think it retains just about enough detail. So what do I think about the GH4? The GH4 is probably the most enjoyable camera I've ever shot with. Just the fact that I can take this around with me everywhere. I can mount it on several rigs without breaking a sweat, and it's just an overall great package that Panasonic has provided for us in terms of packing as many features as possible with the 4K, with the 96 frames per second for slow motion, with the highlights shadow function, pedestal, just so many things to name off the top of my head. And if you have any doubts about purchasing this camera, then there's always the Sony a7S, which I'll be reviewing soon. But in reality, the GH4 is a better overall camera for your money. With $1,600, I mean, you really can't go wrong with this at all. And the GH4 will probably be my go-to A camera for a long time to come. Thank you for watching this segment of Film Bros Media, and tune in for other reviews and my upcoming one of the Sony a7S. Happy filming, guys, and take care.